My name is Jenny Witt. I'm an attorney at Husch Blackwell. I work in the corporate mergers and acquisitions department, and my specialty or wheelhouse is assisting private funds with their fundraising and portfolio acquisitions. And then I also represent small companies and startups when they are taking on investment from friends and family up to large private equity funds. I'm going to introduce you to Daniel Sindelar and Jeff Stowell, who are our panelists, along with Dill, and I will let each of them introduce themselves. Myers, would you take it from here?
Sure, happy to. So without sounding like a broken record, I'm also an attorney at Husch Blackwell. My sort of day-to-day work, I'm a patent, trademark, and technology transaction attorney. So technology transaction attorney being helping with things like software licensing agreements and software development agreements, those sorts of fun things. I work with a variety of different types of companies in that role. I work with technology-based, manufacturing-based companies, life sciences. My background's in biomedical engineering, so a little bit of that in medical device space. And then what I do that's particularly relevant to this panel, I suppose, is I assist oftentimes early-stage companies as I sort of act as an outside general counsel and field questions and either help where I can or get the client to the right place. As far as fundraising goes, I've acted on both sides, like Jenny. Sometimes making sure that the startup looking for money has their IP in order, and sometimes doing diligence on behalf of an investor to make sure that the investee, if you will, has their IP in order. So that's what I bring to the table. Do we want to pass it off to Dan?
Thank you. So I'll give a short introduction. First, I'm very honored to be on this, and I want to thank you for the opportunity. Been a busy couple of weeks, if not months, for us, but I really look forward to hopefully getting maybe one little piece that one person can pick up to make their life better as a startup. It's been the most exciting part of my life, and I'm not young. So looking back, I'm a trained dentist, WashU undergrad at St. Louis U Business. Always very entrepreneurial in my approach. So formed an academy, seeing somehow how the mouth was seeming to look like it played a real role in our overall health. And founded it, was president, met all the researchers from around the world. That was about 12 years ago. Really connected with some key opinion leaders, and the science always outpaces the solutions. And so, okay, go to your dentist, done. But it wasn't that. It became much more granular with the research. And the evolution of that with my personal journey has been, boy, this is a puzzle that needs to be solved. And so we've added everything together. We've got a remarkable team. We've been through seed, we've been Series A, we've been Series A2. I'll look forward to showing you all that stumbling blocks and also keys that work for us. And lo and behold, we now have 5 strong assets. We're in a Series B raise for something that no one knew, and still most of the stuff we know, nobody else knows yet, for some really large disease states. So it can be done, and with my serious introduction, even we can do it. So you'll be stepping outside your comfort zone most of the time, but I'll look forward to discussing this. So I'm CEO of Keystone Bio.
Thank you. And then Jeff, would you give yourself a little introduction in Royal Street?
Sure. Yeah. My name's, good morning, everybody. My name is Jeff Stowell. I am one of the co-managing directors of a firm called Royal Street Ventures. We have a couple offices, one where I am here in Utah, a second where my co-managing director, Laura Brady, works in Kansas City. We also run a student program that is called the University Venture Fund, which helps train young people through kind of a hands-on apprenticeship type experience in how private finance works generally, and as well as entrepreneurism. I actually started my career as an entrepreneur. I am also an attorney, but only by training. I actually think it's possible I may have been at least technically disbarred for not paying my dues. But I'll let you guys investigate that. Went to KU Law, and while I was in law school, I had a chance to start a business. It was completely unrelated to the law, based on some academic work that I had done as an undergrad, and really just dumb luck. But I ended up running that business for about 13 years, a little more than 13 years actually. We had offices at the end we had an office in Denver. We had an office in St. Louis. But we ran that company actually out of Lawrence, Kansas for a really long time. But that company never raised any money. And just in all candor, as a 23-year-old sort of basic idiot in Lawrence, Kansas in the late 90s, early 2000s, there wasn't any money to be raised anyway. It wasn't a relevant thing to talk about. So, 25 years later, I would say that the environment in Kansas City has changed pretty significantly, and in the Midwest generally has changed pretty significantly, and is, by all accounts and data available to us, sort of headed north. I'm an accidental venture capitalist. I was hired by a high net worth family, mostly because of pre-existing relationships and not because of any experience that I actually had, to help them create a direct investment program. It's kind of an interesting family with an interesting history that we don't have time for here, but they were really interested in applying their multi-decades worth of knowledge in how to run companies into an investment thesis, and lots of great lessons to be learned from their work over the sort of 75 years before I joined, and they wanted just to develop some investment theses around that. So we started investing in early stage businesses. We were investing in funds, and doing a variety of things. And ultimately that sort of spun out into an independent early stage venture fund called Royal Street Ventures. So just very specifically, what we tell entrepreneurs is, you've built it, you sold it to somebody that's not your uncle or your college roommate, and you're looking to raise $1 to $2 million. There's room around all of that for us to participate, but that's if there's a sort of a strike straight down the middle that we try and hit, it's that one. So that's the kind of investing that we do. Prior to the call starting, Dan was asking, what do you guys invest in? And it's actually easier to say what we don't invest in, right? We don't do much med device or biotech or pharma related stuff. Just the stuff that's more regulated. A lot of that stuff, I'm a dumb country lawyer. By the time we sort of figure that out, we'll all be bankrupt. So we just don't even try. And there are better investment pools for you than that. If that's the kind of startup that you have, and particularly in the Midwest, there are better investment pools. But that's kind of who we are and who I am.
Perfect. Well, thank you. So the first question that we're going to lead off is just to hit the panel topic, right on the head. And we would love your input on, from the perspective of a founder, a small business that is considering a capital raise. Maybe they're bootstrapped to the point that, they have to take on some external investment in order to grow, or to take it to that next level. From a business perspective, or any other thoughts on what the founder can do to best position themselves to be an attractive opportunity for an outside investor, and then what can they do to make the capital raise go smoothly? Daniel, would you want to start on that?
Sure, and that's an excellent question, and it's one that is close to my heart, because and I'll go back to some of the journey just so it gives a little bit of background. But so we kept seeing things, and a couple of us saw it, before anybody else did. And that doesn't mean that we're savants or anything like that, but we're just focused on it. I have this strange habit. Google Scholar alerts. I have specific topics I put in that 3 times a week. I get scholar alerts for any research for my particular topics. I've done this for 10 years. I've read about 50 to 75 abstracts per week for the last 10 years. I've been offered my PhD for microbiology and immunology just to sit for it. I don't have time. So this is kind of a new way to look at things. So with that in my background, we kept seeing things were going on. So early on, what I was willing to work for free, and most startup founders are. So I did for quite a while to get the story worked out. And the story has to match what you're doing. But that's the hardest part. I mean, we're just shy of a Series B. I don't think our story was really fine-tuned until about the end of January this year. And that doesn't mean we didn't try. Everything you do will allow you to get your story more fine-tuned. We're a little bit unique because we're doing a completely new platform, targeting something no one else except one company is targeting. So every room we walk into, nobody has really probably had a background of what we're doing. So early on, the really key points, if you're really passionate about your subject, you probably talk to more people than you realize. I mean, as a matter of fact, my golf buddy, I thought he could have applied for his PhD. It's kind of kooky, but and he's an attorney, but for biologics. But so you have a group that is willing to be approached, and not all of them will want to, and you have to be cautious with that. But so we started with getting our inner core team together, which was 3 individuals that had a similar understanding and approach to go forward. We loosely formed an LLC prior to getting the attorneys involved, which is so important. I will say that too. Get some money, and then get the proper legal team in place. Thank you, Myers, very much, and team. But the whole thing changes when that happens, and I'm sure Jeff will probably agree. If you haven't gotten to that point of formality in your company, you probably look pretty weak and early. Now I'm talking about biotech. I can't speak for something that might have a shorter line, but so the constant reaching out and early on meeting with people is very important, including investor groups like this. So I'll let you continue.
So Jeff, what do you think from your seat when you're looking at a company that's really, got it together, or one that you pass on? What makes the biggest difference?
Yeah, I mean, let's take this sort of checklist idea, right? Which is sort of the title of the slide. I mean, one of the things that's I think is really important for any entrepreneur, and I'm very passionate about people's ability to start businesses. And you heard me say earlier, I'm a reluctant venture capitalist. I'm a reluctant venture capitalist not only because 10 years ago I didn't know what the hell I was doing and became a venture capitalist. I'm also a reluctant venture capitalist because it's literally the worst form of capital available to the market to be able to start a business of any kind. It is narrowly focused on high growth potential businesses, which are not most businesses. And so the checklist that I would want you to have in your head very first off is make sure you want to do this at all. It's not fun money. It's very expensive money, right? Make sure you're in a market, in a place in your life, or even have an outcome that is aligned with what your financier expects. And just in all candor, our expectations are relatively ridiculous in this space, right? We want a minimum of 10x our money back, right? And we usually get that by getting 100x. And this is not necessarily how any one firm works, and it's certainly not the way our firm works, but venture capital is generally structured to get 100x and a whole bunch of zeros. That's how they make their money, and they're willing to sort of cut you loose at the earliest point where it appears this is not going to work. So the very first part of the checklist is make sure you want to get on this train at all, because it's a pretty serious commitment once you do. The easier parts of the checklist are widely available on the internet, so do that work, right? There are people that are really generous with their time and knowledge about how you fundraise. I'm going to speak more to the early stage and less to the later stages, but in the early stages, having a series of ducks in a row, and Dan alluded to some of these, right? It's make sure you're in this space in terms of organization. Make sure you've at least thought about your market size and analyze that. Make sure that you've got a decent lawyer. And I'll just be honest with you, there are not a lot of great startup lawyers out there. You got to go find the ones that are. It's a relatively, despite the fact that I think it's kind of common sense, it's a relatively esoteric practice, and there are not a bunch of people that do it. So go find the ones that do, because they're the ones that are going to protect you the best. There's a few things like that. What makes a great deck? I don't know. I see a 1,000 or more a year. I tend to like most of them, right? That process is known. It's really, do you want to get into this business, right? Do you really want to take money from someone like me? Have you gone through that analysis, what that means for your business versus what might be an alternative outcome? Have you, gotten yourself really well organized? That's what makes fundraising easy, is that you've checked a whole bunch of boxes along the way. We meet a lot of founders who, parts of the things that make them a really good founder make them a bad fundraiser, right? They're like, well, I'm going to break something. I'm going to break the model. And so, hey, Jeff, I'm going to break yours too. Well, actually, you're not. Sorry. I have a very particular way of doing business that's been very successful, and my investors expect me to do business that way. So you're welcome to go raise your own venture fund and break it, but you're not going to break mine. Right. So that's what makes founders great, is they approach problems that way. It doesn't really work with venture funds of any size or type when you approach them that way. So there's just a series of, just decide whether you want to do this and get yourself organized in that box. And a lot of that stuff is known and is well documented and can be found with very limited research.
That's great, Jeff. I think that my favorite thing of what you just said there was making sure you're on the same page with the expectations of your financier. From my perspective, where I'm sitting on the M&A investment side, where I see deals break down, the biggest part is where the expectations of the founder are not aligned with the venture fund, and the founder either thinks that the venture capitalist is going to come around, or the fund is hoping that the founder gets it together and, magically organizes, 7 years worth of grinding work, overnight. It's typically, those issues will come out hopefully when the term sheet is being negotiated at the latest, but it gets pretty disappointing if you get beyond that and you realize that the founder, the team is not on the same page as the fund.
And I might add one more thing, right? And this is as much a choice that people like me make as a choice that founders make. And particularly, again, I'll speak more to my experience as an early stage investor. If you take money from early stage investors, you are entering into a relationship that is statistically just slightly longer than the average US marriage. You better make darn sure you want to be in that relationship with that person, right? And if you don't, then you should not take their money, even if they're offering it to you, because it will go badly. It will. The one thing that I know about startups of all types in most stages is that something will go very poorly along the way. Right. And that will miss someone's expectations. And the only thing you have to be able to rely on when that happens is that set of relationships you have between yourself and your financiers. Because your financiers have unequal power in some of those situations, we negotiate for it and or demand it, depending on, right? And so it's really important that you do that you go through that process of saying, do I want to work with these people for the next 8 to 10 years? If not, I probably ought to go find another path. And I think that's an important, I know we do that calculation, but I don't know that a lot of founders do that calculation, and they should.
I couldn't agree more. And we've had, along the way, a number of possibles that we didn't go forward with to even dive into the depth of how the relationship would be, because you can, use your gut feelings. It's going to be someone that you will be closely almost married to, and for a while. And that is, I think, one of the things. Don't be afraid to make that decision to let something go. Early on, you don't want to. Trust me, you don't want to. If anybody's paying attention to you and they're thinking about giving you some money, you want to grab them. But you have to be thoughtful, because Peter, my chief scientific officer, just, has done quite a few deals prior. And this comes up all the time as an add-on, but they need to be, a champion. Everybody you work with, even your internal team and your investors and everybody around you. If you can get them to be as close to a disciple for your cause, you're going to have an awful lot better chance of success going forward, and people will find ways. I agree.
One follow-on question, I guess, that probably anybody here would be well suited to address, but are there signs of a matchmaking going right or going wrong that people should be on the lookout for?
Well, I'll say two things. Some of this you can do up front, right? Some of this is raising venture capital is a sort of a statistically low likelihood event anyway, right? So there are things that you can do to sort of slightly improve your chances. And a lot of founders don't do them as well as they could, particularly those that are raising for the first time. I think second and third time folks sort of figure it out. They're like, oh, well, I'm not going to make that mistake again. The first one is go find some people that understand your space, right? Look on the webpage and find the companies that are like, wait a minute, they invest in that and that and that. And that looks like something I do. So they must be excited about the problem that I'm trying to solve. Do that work. It's pretty important because, I mean, look, I pass annually on many deals that I know someone's going to do and someone's going to make money on. I just didn't do them because I'm not excited about it. I just don't care. Right. And some of that is I don't understand. I don't have time to understand. I just don't have time to get up to speed. It doesn't meet your time frame. So trying to find those investors that already share a passion for the problem that you're trying to solve, I think is a very key thing you can do to sort of skip the problem, Myers, that you're alluding to. Is like, is this already going off the rails, right? It's not as obvious as, if you're sitting at dinner and your date's looking out the window or at his or her phone, right? It's a little less obvious than that. There are some things that people take as off-putting from a venture capitalist that often are not, right? So some delay in response. Look, if it's 3 weeks, yeah, you've been ghosted, move on. But if it's been a week or so, that is more likely than not that venture capital is doing work. So give it a moment or give it a little ping or raise it back up so there's some things that are not necessarily that are. If you disagree fundamentally on the value of your business, you will not ever come to an agreement. You may get a deal done, but one of you is going to be pissed. So just don't. If you think your business is worth $50 million and I think your business is worth $5 million, just turn around and go out the door, because we will not bridge that gap. If you think your business is worth 7.5 and I think it's worth 5, we're probably going to figure it out. Right. But in the first circumstance, you might actually get a deal done, but somebody's going to be hacked off about it. And that will flush you down the drain right away. There's some things like that I would argue are are sort of pretty clear markers that this is not necessarily somebody you want to do business with. The other piece of advice, we actually proactively do this with folks that we're talking to, but you can do it on your own. You don't need anybody's permission to do this. Call other entrepreneurs that those funds have invested in. Call those CEOs. Email them, say, hey, I'm thinking about talking to these guys. Do you recommend it? And get that. You'll get more unvarnished opinions that way than you're going to get from anybody else.
Yep. Just like any legit home contractor, they'll give you references, just like, any fund or investor should be able to do the same.
Well, and I'd argue don't even wait to be given them. Go take them.
Mm-hmm.
We brag about them on our websites. Call those people.
Yeah. And can I add a few things? So I agree completely. And until you understand the chair that Jeff's sitting in, you really are blindly throwing things out. You expect too much out of an individual that's having something thrown at them that might not fit their. That's why before this started, what space are you in? What type of deal do you do? What stage? All those are really important to pre-sort. I mean, there's groups like PitchBook and all of that. I don't know how well that's thought of. I use it as just a resource. Resi does conferences. JP Morgan Biotech Showcase for us works well. Conferences like this, excellent. And yet, when you're reaching out to VCs, even a no can be a win for you if they see a reason. Every once in a while, like I got a wonderful referral from someone that was at a pharma venture fund, and we were way too early to discuss this with him, but he kind of thought this was kind of a cool idea a long time ago. There's no way he was going to invest in it. But we've become friends, and he's given me a number of referrals and thoughts, and he actually been a confidant for mine. So, and I imagine someday we'll end up doing something. So don't ever think anything you're doing is a waste of time. Try to pre-sort it a bit, and you have to stay within your own bandwidth. But with that, you'll learn something from that. Now, you don't want to be a biotech sending a pitch deck to someone that just does tech, because you're probably just going to be wasting their time. But just some thoughts on that.
Great. So actually, you just kind of touched on this. One of the next questions we have, and this is a two-parter for Dan and Jeff. But the first part is for Dan, and that's the how. How do you find investors? Whether be them angel investors, family, friends, VC, whatever that looks like. And in the case of a more institutional investor like Jeff, how do you find potential companies to invest in, and what are the important factors that you consider to move forward with an investment? And so maybe we'll start with Jeff for this one.
Yeah, I mean, my answer is our cheat code is to actually invest in under-resourced environments. And so stand on a street corner and wave a checkbook around, right? It's not particularly sophisticated. But so we don't do a ton of outbound, right? We don't look very far outside the established channels that we have, but this, and we're not alone in that regard. So the best way to sort of find investor, or maybe even more appropriately, find access to investors, is actually very similar to, right, find a way to swim in one of my channels, right? So our best deal referrals come from our own CEOs who say, hey, I went to this conference and talked to this person and they're starting this thing and I think you would like it, right? We do those deals at a much higher success rate than any of our other channels, because our CEOs have already been through the ringer with us once or twice, already know what we're looking for, understand our thesis, are working towards helping us create success in that thesis. And so if they see something, they know, they're like, that's pretty close. You might want to call Jeff, right? That's our best channel. So in the same way that I would say, make sure you call those people and get a reference on how we are to work with, call those people and see if you can't get an introduction, because that's our best deal flow channel, or find them at a conference, or that's our bar none. Our investors are also a great channel for us. And then the Midwest in particular, one of the things that I have found, it's not quite as well developed as it is in Utah, but or even the Mountain West generally. The Mountain West generally shares deals really well, partly because there's just not enough of us writing enough checks to fund all the deals that we see. Midwest is not quite as good as sharing deals, but it's getting better. And so actually it's, if I talk to one fund, it just asks very specifically, like if you talk to me, ask me if you can talk to KC Rise or anybody in St. Louis or Dundee or anybody in Chicago, or right. I'm just, there's a whole bunch that I can think of. Just ask me. We all know each other. Because more than likely I'm willing to say, hey, yeah, this wasn't for me, but it might be for you, but not you, or for those two, but probably not her. Right. We can kind of make some of that traffic cop judgment for you because we know, and we know each other. And so, ask for that specific referral. But the very first thing I would encourage you to do is try to jump into one of our existing channels. And usually our best channel is our CEO network, folks we've funded before.
That's great. I especially appreciate the kind of what can I do tomorrow type advice. Like reach out to an existing
My CEOs are going to be pissed. I don't even know.
Yeah, they're going to like that.
Here. Did I just unload 600 phone calls on my CEO network?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. No, that's great. Dan, how about you?
I agree. And go to the conferences, the investor meeting conferences. We learn so much, and you do build your tribe outward from you when you do that, and you also improve your discussions. You'll get contacts. We've had quite a bit of add-ons to the company from all of those, and there's quite a bit that you do. You focus on your story, you focus on your deck, and to me that just seems so silly, because obviously everybody should know what we're doing, but it isn't. And then to go back to what Jeff had mentioned, always make sure you're meeting someone where they are, not where you want them to be. And they may not be the person you need to talk to, but I agree. And then too, there is just unwritten rule. I don't know if this is typical, but when someone's interested, it seems like everybody starts getting interested. And I don't know if that's your temperament when you reach out to people, or if it just starts to happen at the same time. Because we're in one of those vortexes right now, and every time when we closed seed, all of a sudden A showed up right on the heels of seed, so we jumped right to it. And then we're in a space with biotech where we're either making new discoveries or we're probably dying. So we made new discoveries. A2 was 1 year later, and then we thought we had a good 2-year runway. Get to a certain point, inflection points, exit points potentially, or whatever for a Series B, really gift wrapped it. And we made discoveries at the end of 2020. COVID last year was a great thing for people that are doing internals, terrible for the universe and terrible for all of us in every regard. But as a company, we just put our heads down and made some really important preclinical advancements that now I pretty much say it demands us to go after the Series B, and it's being met with good results. So always be ready to raise. You'll always want to raise. Don't raise too much. If you raise too much, you will have given your heart to the company is key and the purpose is key, but you also can raise too much too early. And we're going through that conversation right now because we have some people that want to throw some ridiculous money at us. And yet what we'll end up looking like afterwards, there's all kinds of things, problems you have to deal with as you get farther down the road. that they're always intriguing conversations. So if we would raise too much, how much of that is sitting in a, in an account while we're waiting for something to hit to be started, and we've just diluted the hell out of us, pardon my language. So, those are all conversations that eventually get into your world. You won't have those when you're first doing an initial startup because it won't make any sense and it's not relevant. So the process is as exciting as anything I've ever done. I'm sure there's been a few times I thought I should have bought a dry cleaner and just taken the cash home every night, but that was early.
Cash flow is not a bad thing, man.
Cash flow is not a bad thing. And also, when you talk about meet
I have
them
a light depression that I don't own either a car wash or some self-storage.
Yeah, just leave it at the door. But
Yep.
So then too, very storied guy for acting as an advisor to find investors for companies. And I talked to him last year. He knows nothing about biotech. So I'd have a call, or our team would have a call with somebody that was looking for the car wash or the trailer park, something that, was a land related, and I'm joking about those too, but had no conception or desire for biotech. And okay, we're going to change the world. Well, I could care less. They want to know what your EBITDA was and what your everything,
Right. 0, 0, and 0 because it's biotech.
Spend less than we take in with the investments. That's our whole purpose. And then turn that into gold. And it's an exciting concept, but you have to be talking to somebody that knows that 10 times over or 100 times over, according to Jeff.
Dan, just a follow-up question on what you were going through there. Can you speak to the startups, founders in the audience? You said you're kind of caught in a vortex right now of evaluating some different, partners. What are you looking for? How are you negotiating that process as you select a partner? Or in the past, how did you differentiate one over another?
I'm very glad you asked that question. And I'm sure Myers is too. So it's been an interesting couple of months, and there's a lot of personality involved. There's also some strategic agreements or partnerships that you consider. And those can help you in other ways. Things that they can bring, things that they can advance. So I won't get into details, but so we signed one last night, finalized it. It's an interesting one. I will leave it at that. But it will help us in the long run in extraordinary proportions. It allows us to build upon another one that I'm probably going to be finalizing in the next day or two that's got a little more looseness to it. But so the things, for starters, both, I don't want to be so sappy to say you've got to be willing to be connected to the groups for a while, but you really do. And, there's a lot of Zoom calls. There's a lot, and right now you can't be in the same room, shake their hand, look in their eye and find out if they're elbows up or elbows down. So it really helps to know that about people. So the one from last night, I really got somewhat personally involved because I really find a great person. And, overnight got an email and the last line means so much to me. And it's going to really be sappy to you all. But, great, I acknowledged that it was sent. Myers will probably find this funny, but he said, let's rock this thing. And if you knew who it was, you'd think, wow, the combination of that and let's rock this thing really kicks. So, you kind of get a personal connection. Don't avoid, getting connected with people. The one tomorrow had a lot of guards to it. Myers, turn my microphone off if I say too much, but I had a gut feeling for it, and I think it might turn out really, really well. And it's more of I'm a boomer, so of course, I think the person, relationship capital is supreme and all of that baloney. But I've had a personal kind of relationship capital with that individual. And I'm sure Jeff will probably be ready to throw the book at me for saying all of this. But you really have to have that on the other side. Jeff knows this as well as I do. You're married to those people for some time. Our current investor loves us. I'm constantly keeping him up to date, our primary or initial Series A, because he's that individual knows more about us than anybody else outside the company. So if I stopped all the other raises, I could probably draft behind his lead because he sees what we're doing, and all kinds of other steps that could follow on. So that's where I'll leave it.
Sounds like depth and familiarity with the subject matter, and then your personal rapport, to find an enthusiastic, loyal, partner.
Yeah, and I'm not just talking about somebody that you want to play golf with or something like that, because that's always nice. But I'm someone that gets your vision, gets fired up about it, is trying to help you before you even come into a deal, and you can kind of tell. I think time will tell.
Jeff, anything for you that differentiates one business over another? How you kind of evaluate apples to apples?
I mean, I have a problem. It's one of the things that makes me not very good at this job, and that is, if you're willing to start a business, I'm kind of all in, right? If you've got the stuff to go and try that and take that risk, I'm hugely supportive. I don't care if it's venture backable. I don't care. It's right. If it's what you want to do and have the courage and the gumption to go and try and figure that out, I'm pretty fired up about that stuff, right? And so I like, at first blush, nearly everything I see, right? I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. I've never, right? I also have an obligation because I took a whole bunch of people's money. They want it back in spades. I have an obligation to those people too. And so I have to sort of go through that iteration of, okay, well, I love it. Okay, how big is that market? How big is that problem? How is this solution resonating in the early days with that market? And what proof points can I gather for that? How much does this person or this team across the table actually know about that problem? And how are they attacking it, right? We're also in a world in which what's interesting about market size is that we're now constantly creating new markets, right? The Airbnb story is the most popularly told. People are like, who the hell is going to let some rando sleep in their extra room for money? That's not a thing, right? Not only is it a thing, it's an entire economy now, right? And so we are in a accelerated version of people creating markets where they did not prior exist. And so I'm trying to go through all those stages as fast as I can, while also just at the top level, I'm excited about all of it, right? And some of this is probably my sort of pretty distinct bias that I believe myself to be at this point pretty unemployable because I've never really worked for anyone. And so it's dangerous for me to have to go into the workforce. So it's exciting to me that people can still start companies because I may have to do that one day. But I just get excited about all of it. And so I think most of us do, particularly early stage investors. I think that's what excites us the most. And so it's just this sort of constant sort of peeling back of the potato, right down to, okay, have I gotten to the chunk that I feel like I can eat to try and accomplish the goal that my investors expect me to accomplish? And that's the process. And so is there something that turns me off? No. I like all of it. Are there a set of things that actually make deals blow up for us pretty early, which I think is one of the questions you kind of pre-sent us? There's actually a few mistakes that get made. I'll say the one most common thing. I don't care how excited I am about your company. I don't care how great it is. I don't care if you're off to the races. If your cap table's screwed up, I have been in the past willing to do the work to try and help you fix it, so that we can write a check into a deal that we're excited about. I'm getting less and less willing to do that work. If you're a first angel investor bought 40% of your company for $25,000, I'm sorry that that's the way that went, but I'm not going to help you fix that. Right? It's just we've got to start setting expectations and cap tables in the early days better than we have done, because it makes it nearly impossible for me to be able to buy some portion of your company, for the next 2 or 3 investors to be able to buy some portion of your company, and for you to still own any of it at all. Right? I need you to be incentivized to make actually really undue sacrifice. I need to have an incentive for you to do that. I'm effectively going to ask you to break your back for my financial gain. I need you to be able to have some financial gain too, or you won't do that. Well, we break that cycle usually in the angel round by not correctly structuring the way money comes into companies. And that's the number one issue that we see. It's getting better right now because the market's kind of founder friendly. And so everybody's just signing safes. Well, that I can deal with that on the back end, right? Or signing occasionally simple convertible notes. Those seem to be out of favor even. But in those cases, we can deal with it. But I see a lot of broken cap tables, and we're just less and less willing to fix them.
I couldn't agree more. Bravo. And so being a founder, it is a selfless thing. You will give yourself, and don't forget to walk through the room and turn off what you were thinking about when your family's sitting there. Note to self. But you will be selfless in this space. But if you are selfish anywhere, and I mean this from the start, be selfish about your cap table as much as you can. Because you will know the company as well as anybody, but you're not as meaningful if your cap table dilutes you completely. It's not as much a power grab as just that's one of your paybacks for what you do. I couldn't agree more. And then too, they do get really, one of our proudest moments is we're going into a B with just a streamlined, what would be considered a very streamlined cap table. So I agree completely, Jeff.
And I suspect there's a decent chunk of the audience that doesn't know what we're talking about right now. Go figure that out.
Yeah.
Right. Go learn about cap tables and cap structures. Go figure that out. Even if you have to read what's Brad Feld's book.
Something like that. I've got it on my shelf.
Yeah, that one, right? Go read that one. Go read one chapter in that book. There's one chapter about cap tables, right? Go read that, and just so you can see and then envision how a capital structure works from day one to day whatever. It's the most important thing, and you have to own it, because if you don't own it, I will. Because it's my job to understand that. It's my job to understand that more than I understand anything else. Yeah. And so don't put yourself at a disadvantage against your investor by not understanding your capital structure and its possibilities. You have to understand that stuff.
And there's a lot of inferred thoughts in there. If you gave everything away early, you obviously somebody didn't think you had much. So, I mean, you can really get into the psyche of just the way it feels. So it really is a tell. And every second meeting, first thing they want is your cap table to find out where you were, what's going on. You can just read into it. It's a background.
And from my perspective as the lawyer, we always say, especially in tech deals that we're helping on, you've got really 2 pillars of the deal. You've got the cap table, who owns the company, and you have the IP, and who owns the technology or the product. And if a founder has those 2, locked down on paper, signed up and, neat and tidy, it paves the way for a much smoother capital raise. And there may be negotiations about, governance and blocking rights and all of the legal stuff. But if you have those 2 pillars, really firm, then I would say it makes everything else just so much easier.
From the IP perspective, I mean, a number of things can be cleaned up from an ownership, having a tidy house perspective, but it's a lot easier to have it clean from the start than it is to clean it up later. And that makes everybody's headaches fewer. And so I would encourage you to make sure that IP is owned by the proper entity and you have the right agreements in place to the extent somebody is moonlighting or to the extent you're outsourcing things to a third party. That's from the diligence perspective. When I'm looking at a potential investment, that's the first thing I look at. Who owns this? And Jenny just alluded to that. And like I said, sometimes you can fix it. Sometimes it's hard to fix it. And occasionally it's unfixable. And that's a big problem.
I agree. Can I add one other thing? And I did this kind of on purpose. So as a startup, you'll always be against preconceived notions. And if you're a startup and you're doing something different, they don't know what you're doing. Nobody does. When I say they, the universal they. So I introduced myself as a dentist, and I'm the CEO of a company that's a biotech. So gum disease. Why don't I just go to the dentist? So I look at everything as a problem, a consequence, and a solution. So problems always outpace the solutions in something new. So we had a problem. There was this bacteria in the mouth. The solution is to, in our case, develop monoclonal antibodies, the only biologic known to eliminate it. It actually shows back up 7 days after a cleaning. So that's a pretty good problem, a pretty good solution. But the consequence is where we make our way. There's a lot of preconceived notions on what the consequence is. So, okay, people are going to have nice, fresh breath and pretty gums. That's not our consequence. We've identified a toxic protein that's associated with Alzheimer's disease, and we're going to have probably 6 papers out this year discussing it. So that's one of our consequences. Another one is it's starting to look like it really is the inflammatory driver that everyone thought. So that's when I said it wasn't until January where the conversation got a little crisper. And it probably came about because I was tired of trying to explain everything and bring it back to just a short little discussion. Since we've gotten that back to that, we get past the preconceived notions and we're busy. We're doing a B before we're probably needing to. So thanks for letting me explain that.
Are there any questions in the chat box? I'm not seeing anything. I just want to make sure we're not missing anything.
No, I don't see any questions. Dan, Jeff, do you have any parting wisdom or a particularly hairy deal that you learned a lot from?
There's no reason to talk about any of that kind of stuff. But one of the things, and I can't take credit for this. This is a mantra that I've taken from actually someone else. This guy named Alex Dunstan. You can find him on Twitter. And he and I agree on very little, but he and I do agree on this particular one. He laid out a couple years ago this sort of process for answering any question from a VC. And beyond some sort of technical details or your cap table or these kinds of things, I think this actually works pretty good, because what you really don't want is to leave me or anyone like me exploring the minutia of the problem you're trying to solve, because we'll just talk ourselves out of it. So in order to get us out of the minutia, right, follow these 3 steps. And I'm going to look at my phone because I'm going to read them to you. I want to make sure I get them right? Start with, this is what we know, right? Hey, and in an early stage business, it's like, hey, I actually worked at this company for X number of years and I was the VP of this thing, and this is busted and this is why it's busted, right? So to start with that premise and then describe how you are solving that problem and what hypotheses you're testing, right? Because even in the early stage, even in the later stages, you're always testing hypotheses about how you can better solve problems. In the early stages, that's all you're doing, right? It's a set of iterating on your product and on your business model over and over and over again. So talk to us about, I'm testing hypotheses, right? We're going to do this. We're going to do this. One of the things that a lot of early stage VCs are looking for is how quickly you learn, right? So this is what we know. This is the hypothesis we will test. And then this is what we would look like at scale, right? Because that's what gets venture capitalists fired up. And this is not relevant to round, right? Pre-seed to Series E, we're all thinking about, well, what's the next level of scale? Right? If we are right about this hypothesis, or if we learn these things about this hypothesis, this is what that looks like at scale, right? Describing that and removing us from the minutia, just do it for every single question we ask, right? This is what we know. This is what we're going to test. And that will evolve over time, right? Because you're always going to learn. And you're always going to reach a different scale if you're growing. And so you can just repeat that over and over and over again. And I really like that sort of formula for entrepreneurs to be able to keep financiers of any sort of on track, right? It's like, no, stay with me. No, don't look over there, because actually that's a bucket of dead squirrels. Don't look over there. Right? Look at me and think about how we build this business. And that's sort of, I suppose, the parting wisdom that I would leave, because I've been sort of passing on this tip to folks, and then I've seen people use it on me, and I'm like, oh, that was a great magic trick you just did. Yeah, that's sort of my parting wisdom.
Everyone write that down. Write that down. Because as a founder, you're probably doing something that somebody isn't doing. And so in your core, you always want to prove what you're trying to do. And I've had meetings where they actually go, okay, I'm already assuming that you are doing what you say you're doing. You don't, so you have to kind of get past that and get to the simplicity that Jeff just described. So excellent.
We got one question for you, Dan, from the audience. We got a question that you can address as you see fit, but it's somebody asked if you were going to clinical trials soon.
So part of the journey is, we're a Delaware C Corp based out of St. Louis, virtual model, work being done all over the globe. And we formed an Australian subsidiary. So we are starting probably in another, within the net, we're finalizing all of the pre-portion of the clinical trial to start within the next 2 months in Australia. So yes, excited. There's various reasons. Our path for development of a monoclonal takes much longer than a small molecule development. So the advantage to that is it's forced us to work and really build our preclinicals. So 2020, even though we were waiting for product to be finalized, ready to go, it really was gold for us. And we're in a strangely nice position now because you don't know what's going to show up in the future. So there's another company that has another approach to the same thing or similar thing to what we're going after, and their market cap has been as high as 1.7 billion in the last 6 months. So that makes my job easier too. 2 years ago, didn't know that was going to show up. 2 years ago, didn't know how we were. So, always keep going towards, follow. I always say, follow the path, pick up the crumbs along the way. The crumbs that you find with data and with discussions with others will lead you to where you're supposed to be. So yes, we are.
Perfect. Well, I know we're getting low on time, so I think just wrap it up with a big thank you, particularly to Dan and Jeff. I hope the audience was able to glean some useful information. I found it to be fantastic. So thank you both, and thank you to the audience.